It started as just another high-energy night on The Tonight Show until Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson noticed something on a father's wrist that made him stop mid-sentence and changed everyone in that studio forever. Studio 6B was electric with anticipation. The Roots were locked into their pre-show groove, the audience buzzed with excitement, and Jimmy Fallon was running through his final mental checklist. Tonight's guest was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, returning to promote his latest action film about fathers, sacrifice, and the complex burden of legacy. The iconic New York City skyline glittered through the studio's massive LED backdrop, creating that perfect Tonight Show atmosphere. The stage was set for what everyone expected would be another charismatic conversation filled with The Rock's trademark humor and unexpected depth. What nobody noticed during the pre-show excitement was the man in row 8, seat 17. Robert Sullivan, 54 years old, sat perfectly still in his Marine Corps dress uniform, the same uniform he'd worn to his son's funeral 8 months ago. On his left wrist, catching the studio lights with every small movement, was a watch. Not just any watch, but a limited edition timepiece from The Rock's military watch collection, designed to honor service members and their families. The watch had belonged to his son, Captain James Sullivan, 28 years old, killed in action in Syria while leading a rescue operation that saved 12 lives. James had bought the watch the day before his final deployment. "Dad," he'd said with excitement, "look what The Rock designed. It's got this inscription about legacy. If I'm going to wear something into the field, it should remind me why I'm there." The show opened with Jimmy's monologue, earning genuine laughter from the audience. When he announced Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the studio erupted. 300 people on their feet, showing genuine enthusiasm. The Rock walked onto the stage with that characteristic blend of massive physical presence and unexpected warmth. He and Jimmy embraced like old friends, their chemistry immediate and authentic. "Dwayne Johnson, everybody," Jimmy said. "Thank you so much for being here, man." "Jimmy, always good to be back," The Rock said. "Studio 6B feels like home at this point." They eased into the interview with practiced comfort. The Rock began talking about playing a military father, about the research he'd done with actual service families, about the weight of telling stories that honored real sacrifice. "You know, Jimmy," The Rock said, "when you're playing a character who's military, you realize you're not just entertaining, you're representing real people, real families, real sacrifice. That responsibility changes how you approach every scene." As he spoke, The Rock's eyes naturally scanned the audience, making eye contact, connecting with individual faces. That's when he saw it. A glint of light, metallic, familiar. His eyes focused on row 8, on the man in the Marine dress uniform, on the watch catching the studio lights. The Rock's speech pattern faltered just for a fraction of a second. "Actually, Jimmy," The Rock said, his voice taking on a different quality, "I just noticed something in the audience that I need to address." He stood up and walked toward the edge of the stage, his eyes locked on Robert Sullivan. The audience quieted, sensing something unscripted was happening. "Sir," The Rock said, pointing toward row 8, "the gentleman in the Marine dress uniform, would you mind standing up for a moment?" Robert's eyes went wide with shock. He stood slowly, aware that 300 pairs of eyes had suddenly turned toward him. "Thank you," The Rock said. "First, thank you for your service. That uniform represents sacrifice most of us can't fully comprehend." Robert nodded, not trusting his voice to speak. "But I noticed something else," The Rock continued. "That watch you're wearing. Can I ask you about it?" Robert looked down at James's watch, then back up at The Rock. He felt his throat tightening. "It's from your collection," Robert managed to say, his voice cracking. "The military heritage line." The Rock nodded slowly. "I recognize it, but the way you're wearing it, I can tell there's a story there. Would you be willing to share it?" The studio was completely silent now. Robert looked at his daughter Sarah sitting beside him with tears already streaming down her face. She nodded encouragingly. "It belonged to my son," Robert said, his voice stronger but heavy with emotion. "Captain James Sullivan. He bought it the day before his last deployment. He was wearing it when his voice broke, when he was killed in action. 8 months ago." Jimmy felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't an interview anymore. The Rock stood completely still, and everyone could see his expression transform. The charismatic entertainer disappeared, replaced by something more primal, a man confronting the reality of sacrifice. "Jimmy," The Rock said, not taking his eyes off Robert. I need to do something, is that okay? Jimmy didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Whatever you need. The Rock walked off the stage, jumping down with athletic ease. He made his way through the audience, and people instinctively made space, understanding they were witnessing something sacred. He reached Robert's row. Sir, The Rock said, his voice no longer the performative rumble of a movie star but raw emotion, would it be okay if I heard more about your son? Robert's composure shattered. Tears began streaming down his face, but he nodded. What was his name? The Rock asked gently. James, Robert said. Captain James Robert Sullivan. He was 28. He led a rescue operation that saved 12 lives. He died making sure his team got out safely. The Rock reached out and gently took Robert's hand, the one wearing James's watch. He held it carefully, looking at the timepiece with reverence. He chose this watch because of the inscription, The Rock said softly. The legacy we leave is measured in the lives we touch. Robert quoted, his voice breaking. He said it reminded him why he served, why he kept going back even when I begged him to stay safe. Jimmy Fallon walked off the stage and joined them in the audience, abandoning every protocol of television production. Robert, Jimmy said gently, your son sounds like he was an extraordinary person. He was everything, Robert said. He was my best friend. We did everything together. He admired you so much. He looked at The Rock. Said you represented the kind of strength he wanted to embody, not just physical, but the strength to be vulnerable, to care about people. The Rock's eyes were glistening with tears now. Robert, The Rock said, his voice thick with emotion, can I tell you something? When we created that watch collection, when I wrote that inscription, I was thinking about my own father. One of my biggest regrets is that I spent so much of my life trying to prove something instead of just telling him how much he meant to me. He paused, looking directly into Robert's eyes. Your son didn't just wear this watch. He lived what it represented. He understood that legacy isn't about what we achieve for ourselves, it's about what we give to others. He touched 12 lives directly by saving them, but he touched countless more through his example, through his sacrifice. Robert was crying openly now, as was much of the audience. The watch on your wrist isn't just metal and glass, The Rock continued. It's a bridge. It's James's way of staying connected to you, of reminding you every day that his legacy continues through you. He reached down to his own wrist and began removing his watch, a custom piece that rarely left his arm. Robert, this watch has been with me through some of the most important moments of my life. It's traveled with me around the world. He held it up so the studio lights caught it. I want you to have it, The Rock said. Not as a replacement for James's watch, nothing could replace that, but as a companion to it. So when you look at one wrist, you see your son's legacy. And when you look at the other, you see a reminder that his sacrifice is honored, remembered, and valued by people he never met. Robert stared at the watch, unable to speak. I can't, Robert began. Yes, you can, The Rock said firmly but gently. James gave his life for others. The least I can do is give you something that reminds you that his sacrifice matters, that you matter. With shaking hands, Robert accepted the watch. The Rock helped him put it on his right wrist, so James's watch remained on his left over his heart. The Rock turned to address the entire studio. Everyone, he said, I want you to understand something. We're about to talk about a movie, about entertainment, but this man, Robert Sullivan, and his son, James, they represent what actually matters. He gestured to Robert's uniform. This uniform represents a promise. James Sullivan kept that promise with his life, and Robert is keeping a different promise to honor his son's memory, to carry forward his legacy, to wake up every day even when grief makes that impossible. The audience was completely silent. When I created that watch collection, The Rock continued, I wanted to honor military families, but I didn't fully understand what that meant until this moment. It's about witnessing. It's about seeing Robert in his son's watch and recognizing that grief is love's price, and that price is worth paying because the love was real. Jimmy added his own words. Robert, I know nothing can bring James back or ease the pain, but I want you to know that everyone in this studio, everyone watching at home, we see you, we honor James, and we're grateful. The Rock pulled Robert into an embrace, not a promotional hug, but the kind that happens between men who understand something about loss and the courage it takes to stay standing when everything inside you wants to collapse. Robert sobbed into The Rock's shoulder, his military bearing finally giving way to 8 months of carefully controlled pain. And The Rock held him, this stranger who suddenly felt like family. After several minutes, Robert pulled back, wiping his eyes. James would want this to continue, he said, his voice steadying. He'd want people to laugh. He'd want The Rock to tell his stories. He managed a small smile. He'd probably want you to do the eyebrow thing. The Rock laughed, genuine and warm, and raised his eyebrow in that signature expression. The studio laughed too, out of relief, out of recognition that laughter and grief could coexist. "Robert," The Rock said, "after this show, you and I are going to have a drink in honor of James. And you're going to tell me every story you have about him, because that's how we keep him alive. We tell his stories." The Rock and Jimmy eventually returned to the stage, but everything had changed. Toward the end of the interview, The Rock addressed the camera directly. "I want to say something to everyone watching. We all carry something. We all have loss, grief, pain that we hide behind smiles. Robert Sullivan had the courage to come here tonight wearing his son's watch, carrying his son's memory." He paused. "If you're out there carrying something heavy, whether it's loss or regret or pain, please know you're not alone. Please know it's okay to not be okay. And the people you've lost would want you to keep living, keep loving, keep finding moments of joy even in the middle of grief." The show ended differently that night. Jimmy and The Rock stood together at the front of the stage. "Tonight, we learned something important from Robert Sullivan and his son James," Jimmy said. "We learned that legacy isn't about fame or achievements. It's about the lives we touch." The Rock finished the thought. James Sullivan touched 12 lives by saving them, but he touched millions more through his father's courage to honor him. Robert Sullivan returned home to Virginia the next day, carrying something he hadn't felt in 8 months, a sense that his grief was witnessed and honored, that James's sacrifice mattered. The Rock kept his promise. He and Robert met after the show, and for 3 hours Robert told stories about James. The Rock listened to every word, laughed at the funny parts, cried at the heartbreaking ones. 2 weeks later, The Rock announced the Legacy Foundation, dedicated to supporting families of fallen service members. The announcement featured a photo of James Sullivan and a quote from Robert, "My son believed legacy was measured in lives touched. Let's make sure his legacy continues." And Robert Sullivan continued wearing both watches, James's on his left wrist, over his heart, and The Rock's on his right. A reminder that grief witnessed is grief shared. The Tonight Show episode became one of the most watched in the show's history, not because of celebrity, but because it reminded millions that beneath the performances and cameras, we're all just humans trying to honor the people we've loved and lost. It wasn't just late-night television that night. It was a masterclass in how celebrity can amplify sacrifice, how grief needs witnesses, and how sometimes the most powerful moments happen when we stop performing and start witnessing each other's humanity. Some watches tell time. The best ones tell stories.